Hello friends, today I'm making a style arc hope dress and I thought you might want to hang out with me while I do it. A couple of weeks ago I posted a video about making the style arc Sydney dress and a lot of you seemed to enjoy that and said that you'd like more videos like that. So I'm making a dress today. So I thought I'd film it and show you how it goes. Now, despite recent evidence to the contrary, I don't only make style arc dresses, I do make other patterns from time to time. But having said that, I have made 4 hope dresses in the past. So this video won't be as much of a trial and error, figuring it out as I go kind of thing, because I'm fairly confident in making the hope dress now. But there are a few mods and hacks that I like to do to change it a little bit. So I'll walk you through those and show you how I do them. And yeah, should be fun. So this dress is not actually for me, it's for a friend of mine. I've been commissioned by my longtime Instagram friend, AB, who I have never met in person and who does not live in the same country as me. But she's probably the kindest and most supportive person on Instagram, and she's been a long time friend of Brave Little Buckaroo. And a few months ago, she asked me if I would be willing to make her a dress like one of the ones I had shown on Instagram, and I said yes, absolutely. So that's what we're going to do. We looked for fabric together and then she chose some, and what she chose is this amazing Merchant and Mills seersucker. It's so beautiful in this. It's a little bit warmer in real life than it's showing on the screen. It's like a really rich, warm, chocolatey brown with little acorns, I suppose. And I got this fabric, it's by Merchant and Mills, but I got it from the Dahlia Society. If the fabric is still available, I will link it below, but either way, I will link Kristen's shop and her YouTube channel below as well. And it's really beautiful fabric. And having just made my own Sydney dress in seersucker, I'm happy to be working with it again. It was my first time using seersucker last time, so I'm fairly confident that this will go well. And in case you're wondering, for the record, my friend is paying me to make this dress. She has paid for the fabric and she's going to pay me for my time. And also I have been in contact with Style Arc and confirmed that they are okay with me using their pattern for a commissioned dress. Now they're very happy for me to do it as a one-time commission sort of thing, but I think if I decided to set up shop selling hope dresses, they'd have something to say about that. But they are happy for me to use my pattern to make my friend this dress. And luckily, my friend is pretty much exactly the same measurements as me. So I'm just going to make the dress the same size that I always do. And I can try it on and show you what it looks like along the way. She's happy for me to do that. And then when it's all finished, I'll send it to her and we will all be very happy. Okay, so I better get started. I've been putting this off. I've never made an entire garment for somebody else who was paying me before, so I'm a little bit nervous. And I still get a little bit nervous about filming too, to be honest. So I've had this fabric sitting on my desk ready to go for a couple weeks, but I've been just putting it off. But today's the day. We're gonna be brave and we're just gonna do it. What's the worst that could happen, right? Okay, I'm gonna lay this out and get to cutting, and then I'm gonna come back and show you how it goes. Okay, see you soon. I've got some of my pieces pinned out, but I've just realized I didn't introduce myself or say hello or anything before. So just quickly, if we haven't met before, hello, I'm Tamsin, and I live in Perth, Western Australia, where I own an online quilting shop and a long arm quilting business. And I also like to make my own garments and knit and sew and do all sorts of other creative things, which I talk about on this channel. And today we're making a hope dress. Okay, I'm gonna get you off the tripod and just show you one of the mods I like to make when I'm doing the hope dress. Okay, so I find the pocket that comes with the hope dress to be too small. So I always use, well, I find the pockets that come with a lot of things to be too small, but I always use this pocket piece here. If you can just see the black line where that's being cut out, So this is the normal pocket piece that I use. I've taken it from another dress that I made years ago, and I like the shape of it, so I pretty much use it all the time. But in order for it to reach all the way up to the waist seam of the hope dress, the top of it needs to be extended. So what I've done at some point is lay it down on top of the skirt piece, and I've drafted just this piece of paper to go up to the top of the waistband on the waist seam on the skirt piece, and then I've just graded it down to the side to meet the original pocket bag. So that is the shape and size of the pocket bags that I'm going to cut. I'll cut 4 of them, and then I'll insert them basically as normal, but also attaching them to the waist seam. Now, if you want a detailed instructional of how I do that, I did post a video about it during Vlogmas last year. I'll link to that video below, but I'll also go over it, maybe not in as much detail, but I'll walk you through it as I'm doing it today as well. So hopefully you'll find that helpful. Okay, let's talk about the neckline of the hope dress. The original dress, the first one I made, I did by the pattern. And the original dress in the pattern has a keyhole opening with a button and loop closure at the back. And the facing, let's see if I can show you, is just interfaced and overlocked. And then I think they tell you to stitch it down at the shoulder seams, maybe. I'm not sure, but it's not even top stitched in the pattern as far as I remember. I didn't top stitch it anyway, so I assume it's not in the pattern. And look, I just don't love a floppy facing. I don't like it at all. And I found that I could easily get it over my head with the button closed. So in the next 1, 2, 3 versions that I made, I did a bias facing on the neckline. So I've just cut a bias strip, and I've just done a bias facing on the neck and completely omitted the back keyhole opening. So I've just cut the back on the fold. Instead of cutting it with 2 pieces and having a split up the back, I just cut it on the fold, completely omitted the neck opening, and then done a bias facing. And there is also a video in Vlogmas where I go into detail in that, if you like that finish. But when I've just made the Sydney dress, I decided to try another technique that gives us, let me show you, a much neater finish. So this facing is completely stitched down. There's no visible overlocking and no visible interfacing. And it's top stitched on the front, well, on the outside, top stitched all the way around. But it looks so neat and tidy. I think it looks beautiful. So that is the technique that I'm going to use for AB's hope dress. Again, if you want to see in pretty good detail how I did that on the Sydney dress, you can go watch that video. But I will show you again now basically how I do it. So you still need to cut some interfacing, but we don't iron it on straight away. This is the interfacing I like to use. It's a woven interfacing, fusible. So it's not like the papery, plasticky kind. It's actually made of, well, it's like a fabric. It's woven and it's got a fusible on one side. That is available in my shop, and for the record, I sell it for half the price that Spotlight does. So if you need some, get it from me and not Spotlight. And I also have the non-woven kind as well if you need that for some reason. But for garments, this is beautiful. I love the woven interfacing. Okay, so here is my front neck facing piece. There's my back neck facing piece. Here is my fusible interfacing, and what I'm going to do is sew these right sides together, which is the right side of the fabric and the non-fusible side of the interfacing. I'm going to put them right sides together and I'm going to sew along this bottom edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Probably doesn't matter too much, but a small seam allowance. So they'll be right sides together, and then when they're sewn together, we'll flip them back out, and then this will be a nice neat seam. And the interfacing will be on the other side, and that's when we'll press. I'll come back and show you how I go. Okay, so I've sewn them right sides together. They're still not pressed. And I'm just going to go around the curve and clip into the seam allowance so that it will turn out nicely. And then once I've done that, I'm going to turn it right sides out. And then this is what it will look like. We've got the interfacing on this side and the fabric on this side. You're going to roll it out to make sure that the interfacing is tucked underneath the outer fabric, so it looks all neat and tidy. And then we're going to press it, and so then it will be fused, and it will give you that extra stability of the fusing. And then we'll just use it as the facing, and when we sew the right side of the facing to the right side of the garment and flip it inside, then this will be what you see on the inside neck. Beautiful and neat and tidy, no raw edges, no interfaced bits sticking out, no overlocked anything visible. So yeah, that looks beautiful. And then this is the back piece, so I'm going to attach my label, and this is the same label that I used on my Sydney dress, and my friend AB saw the pictures and said that she absolutely loved this label, and it is very on brand. I mean, I call myself Brave Little Buckaroo, right? So that's pretty fitting, I think. So I'm gonna pop one of those in there for her as well. Okay, so here is my beautifully finished facing pieces. So that's the interfacing pressed onto the back, that's fused now. And then that's what it will look like on the inside neck. I've just popped a little bit of this glue stick. It's by Sew Line. I use it for English paper piecing, but any glue stick will do, any washable glue stick. So I've just popped some glue on the back of this label to hold it in place until I can go top stitch around it. And I just wanted to show you a couple of other things. This is my pocket. So you can see here how long it is. Like it's quite long. The normal pocket that I like to use would stop here, but I extend it up to go up to the waistband. So I've got 4 pockets. And then one other modification that I have done this time, I'll just get the original dress and show you. So, oh, sorry, I'm knocking the camera now. So the original, well, the dress has an elastic sleeve, but the original dress just has you overlock the bottom edge of the sleeve piece and then just fold it up and stretch the elastic in it as you sew around. So you just top stitch it in, and then you've just got this raw edge. Well, it's not raw, I suppose, this overlocked edge just in there, which, I mean, it's fine. It does the job, right? But it's not super professional. And as this is a professional endeavor, what I've decided to do is lengthen the sleeve by 1 inch at the lengthen and shorten line. And then that will give me a little bit of extra space, and I'll do a small turn up and then a double fold to make a casing for the elastic to go in. So it'll just be a nicer finish for my lovely friend. Okay, so that's all the pieces cut out, all the preparation done. The only interfacing is on those neck bands, neck facings. This is the sleeve. It's a raglan sleeve, so it's very tricky to see where the front and the back and all of that is. So it it's marked on the pattern piece which side is the front, and I do just like to pin a piece of paper on there with an F so that I know what I'm doing. I could use a marking pen or something like that, but the fabric is dark and, you know, chalk can rub off, and or maybe it doesn't rub off and then it stains it. I just like to use a piece of paper and a pin. So that's what I'm going to do. So I guess it's time to sew. That's the good part. Okay, it's the next day now. My afternoon yesterday was hijacked by a migraine, so that wasn't a lot of fun. But I'm feeling a lot better now, and I'm excited to work on this project. So let's get back to it. I have this morning attached or assembled the bodice, and it doesn't look like much now, but I've assembled the bodice and I have attached the neck facing. And what I'm going to do now is trim down the seam allowance, snip into the curve, and then understitch. So I'll trim down the seam allowance, I'll give it a good press, pressing the seam allowance towards the facing, and then I'll stitch close to this line on the facing side to attach the seam allowance to the facing, and then that will help it to stay rolled over onto the inside once you top stitch it all down. So that's the next job. And if I can just go slightly off topic for a second, if you remember the top that I was wearing yesterday in the first half of this video, it was this one. This is a Sew to Grow Bondi top. This is in a rayon from Spotlight. And you can see like how it's just so slinky and drapey, and it sort of hangs on your body in a soft sort of drapey way. What I'm wearing today is exactly the same pattern, but I've made it in a cotton poplin, which was also from Spotlight. And I made this a few years ago, but I think I've literally never worn it. And the reason for that is because this cotton poplin is so stiff. Like, see how it holds its shape? There's absolutely no drape to that at all. It's like wearing a piece of paper. So that is the difference that fabric type makes when you're making garments. So I'm sure cotton poplin is good for things if you want them to hold their shape and be quite stiff, but this is not a top that I really want that for. So I am wearing it today because it's like 40 degrees and this is cotton, and I'm hoping it will be cool. And I think maybe if I wear it around the house a few times and wash it a few times, it might soften and calm down a bit, because, like, you know, this is not really what we want in our nice little t-shirts, I don't think. All right, I'm gonna go press this to within an inch of its life, understitch the facing, top stitch the facing, and then move on. Nothing groundbreaking here, but I just want to show you how I keep my stitching nice and straight when I'm trying to sew down the facing. So I'm understitching the facing right now. This is the top, this is the facing, and I've graded my seams, so I've trimmed down the facing seam. That's the bodice neck seam, and that's the facing seam with the interfacing on. So I've trimmed them both, but I've trimmed the facing seam further, and then I've pressed them all out towards the facing, and then from the top side I'm understitching. So here, I don't know how well you can, sorry, shoddy camera work. I don't know how well you can see, but the seam that's joining the bodice and the facing is here. And what I do is line that seam up with the inside edge of my foot. So the needle goes in between this gap here, and I line the seam up with the inside edge of this side of the foot, and so then it should keep just a very close but not touching line of stitching up against that seam. That's the plan anyway. Also, as I'm going, I'm keeping this hand underneath to make sure that the seam allowances are actually flipped over to the facing side. So I'll stop every couple of inches and just make sure that's flipped over and laying flat, and then hold it down with my finger as I travel around. Okay, let's go. Okay, so I've understitched, pressed it out and pinned it down, and now I'm going to top stitch around this edge of the facing, again with this edge of the facing lined up against the inside edge of my foot, and then we'll have some nice top stitching on the outside. And that's all done. Because of the busyness and the texture of the fabric, you really can't even see the top stitching. It's here, but it's almost invisible. The thread is also a pretty good match. But that's the neckline finished. Pretty happy with that. I think it looks pretty good. Nice and neat and tidy. The next step is to sew the underarm seams together. And then get to work on the skirt. But because I'm going to do a casing for the elastic arm wristband, I think I'm going to overlock the edge of the sleeve and press up the overlocking and then press it up by about ½ an inch, because I think the elastic I'm using is about 3/8 of an inch. And I won't sew it until I have joined the underarms together, but I'll press it up so that it's easier than trying to press it once it's already assembled. And then once I've sewn the side seam together, I will go ahead and finish it with the elastic, because I just think it's easier to do that job without the skirt attached to it. Yeah, so I'll do that next. And I also just wanted to show you, I'm not sure if you can see, hold on, bear with. I didn't have any overlocking thread that would match. So what I decided to do was just wind some bobbins of the brown thread that I was using. Now this one here is a different brown that I just had in my little bobbin case. So I went ahead and used that because I thought it was pretty close. It's arguably not that close at all really, but I've used it anyway. And I've just wound some other bobbins with the regular brown thread that I am using, so that way I didn't have to go out and buy 4 cones of overlocking thread that I might not use again, or even 4 spools of regular thread that I would only use a little bit of. So I wound bobbins, and I've never tried that before, but it worked really good. So if you happen to have, you know, a lot of regular thread but not overlocking cones, that is an option. Okay, so I have overlocked the bottom edge of the sleeve, and I've just pressed over the overlocking and then pressed it over again by ½ an inch, maybe a tiny bit more than ½ an inch. And then this is the elastic I'll use. And so now I will sew the sleeves together, and down the underarm, if I can show you. So sew down the sleeve, and then this underarm is the tiny bit of the bodice before the waistband, or the waist seam. And then once that's together as a sleeve, then I'll fold it back under, top stitch around it, and insert the elastic. Well, I'm afraid my day has run away with me once again. Despite my clever thread hack, or perhaps because of it, I did indeed run out of thread. So then I had to go to Spotlight and get some more. And then while I was at Spotlight, I saw some storage containers, and I remembered I wanted to get some storage containers to keep ongoing quilt projects in, that were big enough to hold like finished blocks and extra fabrics and stuff like that. And near the Spotlight, in the next sort of shopping bit over, is like a homeware shop that usually has stuff like that. So I went there, drove over there, had a look, and they did have some, but they were like $30 each, which is insane. So a quick Google then sent me to Big W, which is in the big shops further up the road. So I drove back up there and ended up finding these big, so they're not very tall, but they're big and flat. I was hoping to find one maybe that would be big enough to hold a pressed out fat quarter, but these are just a couple of inches, not quite wide enough, but they're plenty big enough to hold finished blocks. And then I also got some smaller ones that 2 of these smaller ones will stack up perfectly on these big ones. So that is satisfying. Oh, and they're half price. That was my point. They are the Sistema, like locky, closey lid ones, and they're half price at Big W right now. $14 for the big ones, $11 for the small ones. So yeah, I got those. I got some thread, and it's 42 degrees outside today, which in American money is 107.6, I think Google said. So hot, and so if I look a bit disheveled, that's why. But I have now overlocked my sleeves, fully constructed the bodice, overlocked the sleeves, and I've pinned up my elastic casing. And I just wanted to show you a tip, again, not groundbreaking, but maybe helpful. If you ever need to leave an opening for some reason while you're sewing something, like to turn something out or insert elastic, at the end where you need to stop, I always put 2 pins right next to each other so I don't forget, because how many times have you just like sewn all the way around and then gone, oh crap, forgot to leave a hole, and then you've got to unpick it. So I just put 2 pins super close together to remind me to stop. That's what I actually came on to tell you. So now I'm going to get back to work. Okay, we have sleeves. I'm very happy with the finish on these. That's what it looks like on the inside. So I've just folded it over again, and top stitched very close to the edge, and then threaded the elastic in, and then closed up the gap. And I think they look beautiful. So now the bodice is completely finished. Got beautiful sleeves. The neck facing is lovely. And everything is overlocked and top stitched that needs to be. So now, next step is to put the pockets into the skirt, make the skirt, gather the skirt, and attach it to the bodice. I always like to say that I can make this dress in a day, which I can technically if I start early and have nothing else I have to do that day, but the chances of that actually happening are very slim. So we're nearly at the end of the second day of this job. I think we may end up going into a third day. But yeah, we'll see how we go. I will get to work on doing the pockets next, and I'll show you how I anchor them into the waistband. Okay, here is the hope dress skirt. It's just 2 pieces, exactly the same, one for the front and one for the back. And here are my pocket pieces, extended so they can go all the way up to the waist seam. And I have already overlocked the outside curved edge of these pockets, because it's just easier to do it now than it is to do it after they're all attached. So I overlock all of my pockets, and then I'm going to attach them to the skirt, right sides together, and you take it all the way up to the top edge of the skirt, and then just line up the raw edges, and I'm going to sew with the normal 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and attach them all the way down the side to all 4 pockets on all 4 sides as normal. Okay, hope dress day 3. I'm going through it a bit this week. I lost half a day to a migraine, and then yesterday I was hijacked by errands, and now today it is 35 degrees outside and my air conditioner has stopped working. So it's very hot in my house. I don't know who to call. I guess an air conditioner repairman, but is that going to cost me an arm and a leg? Anyway, quick note about what I'm wearing today, since we are on the Bondi top comparison train. I'll pop this down a bit so you can see a bit more. So the day 1 I wore the rayon, which was very floaty and drapey, and then yesterday I wore the poplin, which was like wearing a paper bag. And now today I have exactly the same pattern in a linen version, 100% linen, which I also got from the fabric, from Fabulous Fabrics. Yeah, so it is not as drapey as the rayon, but not as stiff as the poplin. And I like it, it's comfortable and light. The only problem being linen is that like when I sit down, it does crease up a lot, especially like in the front where it like pulls up in your lap when you're sitting down. Yeah, that is what I'm wearing today. 3 Bondi tops, 3 different fabrics, very different feels, I think. All right, let's have a look at where we're up to with this dress, and then we'll get back to work. Okay, I have attached all 4 pockets to all 4 sides of the skirt. Then I have overlocked just beyond where I've sewed the pocket to. So I've started overlocking at the top and then stopped here, and then once I sew the rest of the skirt together, I'll just overlock from here down, and that just saves me having to try and go around these pockets later on once they're all together. And then pressed out away from the skirt. And so then the next step is to sew them together. So I'll sew the side seams of the skirt together around the pocket and then down the side, and then I'll come back and show you what happens next. Well, the exhibitioner is buggered, and I called somebody and they said their next available appointment was the 4th of February, which is 2 full weeks from today. And I said, oh no, I will not survive. And they said, sorry. And then they called me back and said, oh, we can come next week if that helps. So they're squeezing me in next Wednesday, which is still an entire week from today, and I'm very sad about it. It's very hot in here. So I apologize for the state of me. It's hot. Anyway, then I had a visit from my daughter, who it's her birthday next week. And she has requested that I make her something. Well, I offered to make her something and she accepted. So she came over to pick out a fabric and a pattern. So that's exciting. Maybe I will film that as well. She wants the Pattern Fantastique Vali Dress, which I have also already made myself 3 of. And the top, I've made it a few times. So that will be fun. But let's get back to the job at hand. I have sewn my skirt pieces together and the pockets. And now I'll show you what I'm going to do next. Okay, so I've sewn all the way around the pocket up here to meet the stitching where I attach the pocket to the skirt, sewn down the side, and now I have overlocked also down the side. And up here I have a pin marking where the skirt side finishes and the pocket begins. So there's a seam down here. Well, it's separate, it's not sewn together. So I've got the skirt pieces on this side, both pocket bags on this side, and this is open through here. But because we have such a high waistband on the hope dress, we don't want the pocket opening to go all the way up to the top of the waist seam, because then that would be like the pocket would be open all of this way. It's like 10 inches, it's too long. So what I like to do is I take the original pattern for the pocket bag, and the original placement for the top of the pocket is right here. So what I do, now I don't know if this is the correct way to do things. As I always say, anytime I'm showing you how I do stuff, it's just how I do stuff. It's not the right way or the best way or the only way. And if you have a way that works for you, you should do it. Because most of the time I'm literally making this stuff up as I go along. But what I like to do is I need to seal the side seam of the skirt so that the pocket opening doesn't go all the way up to this high waistband. So I like to make sure that the seams are like right on top of each other, like I can feel the seam allowances on top of each other. And then I pop a pin in there, and I do that for the length of where the normal pocket opening would begin if I hadn't extended it, which is here. So I'll put my double pins there to tell me when to stop. And so what I'm going to do is, as I'm sewing, I'm going to feel with my fingers to make sure these, as I'm sewing, I'm going to feel with my fingers to make sure these seam allowances are right on top of each other. And I'm going to sew as close as I can, but just inside the stitching line that has attached the pocket. So that way, when I turn this out the right way, the side seam will be closed a few more inches. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit tricky to explain, and I think I did actually forget to film it when I did the original pocket bag or pocket tutorial during Vlogmas. So that may be a little bit confusing. But basically, just lay it out nice and flat. Align these seams perfectly. So both of the pocket bags are pointing out and the seam allowances are pointing towards the pockets. And then sew right down super close to that seam. Okay, I've sewn down about this far, maybe like 3 inches. And then, so now when I open it up and turn it right sides out, this is the pocket opening here. And then the side seam of the skirt is closed. And then below the pocket, obviously, the rest of the skirt is also closed. So the next job is to decide which is the front and which is the back, because up to this point, they've both been exactly the same. And whichever side is the front, we're going to fold the pocket towards the front. So I've got just one layer, that's the back, this is the front, and I've folded the pocket towards the front. And now I'm just going to baste across the top here to keep the pocket anchored to the front waistband. And then it's time to gather the skirt. So I just gather as normal because it's only a couple of inches and this fabric is pretty lightweight. If you're using like a really heavy fabric, or if it was a much wider space, you might want to start your gathering after the pocket bag, or you might want to gather first and then anchor the pocket bag. But because this is just a small space and the fabric is really light, I'm just going to gather it all together and attach it that way because it's just a bit easier to do that. And I think it will turn out fine. Okay, so I'm going to baste across the top, then do 2 rows of gathering stitches on the longest setting on my machine, and then I'm going to gather it up and attach it to the bodice. We're getting there, friends. Quick note about gathering. When I remember, I like to gather in a thread that is contrasting to the thread or to the fabric that I'm using. That way when I'm done gathering and I need to pull out my gathering stitches, it's much easier to make sure I haven't missed any because it will stand out. And something I also do when I remember is to mark the center point of the front and back skirt. And then I'll also mark the center point, if I haven't already, of the center front and back bodice. So when I go to gather the skirt into the bodice, I will pin at the center front. And then what I've also done is stopped my gathering stitches at the side seams. So I've gathered all the way across the front, stopped, and then gathered all the way across the back and stopped, and I've left long tails. So what I will do is match the center front skirt to the center front bodice. And then I'll pull the gathering stitches from this end, the side seam of the center front, or the side seam of the front skirt. And I'll just pull these gathers until this front side panel fits into the front side panel of the bodice. Does that make sense? So once I've got that pulled up into the right size, then I'll go from the other side seam and pull the strings or pull the threads from this side into the center until that's correct. So I'm only ever trying to gather a quarter of the skirt at a time. And so I just feel like that makes my gathers easier to distribute evenly. So I know that they're marked in the center and they're marked at the side. And I'm just going to gather only that portion with these strings. And then I'm going to gather only that portion with these strings, and then I'll do the same for the back. Maybe everybody does this. Maybe that's how you're supposed to do it. I don't know. But that is how I like to do it when I am well organized and paying attention. One thing about the hope dress is that it doesn't actually take that much gathering. So you can see here, oh, hopefully the light's not very good, it's getting dark now. So here I've put my two center pins right next to each other so I remember where the center is, and here is the side seam. And I've pulled up this thread and pinned it together, and it's really not very tightly gathered at all. It doesn't take a lot of gathering. But anytime I'm gathering, something I like to do is, so the stitches on the inside here I have actually tied in a knot, so I'm only pulling these two stitches on the outside, or threads, sorry, I'm pulling the outside threads. The threads on the underside I've knotted so they can't pull through. And then once I've gathered it up, to keep it there and not come ungathered between now and when I sew it, hopefully you can see this, I like to wrap the thread in like a figure 8 around the pin at the end. And then that way it holds the gathering in place. It's not going to just unravel on me between now and when I get it to the sewing machine. And then when I'm finished and I pull that pin out, those threads are easy to remove because they've just been wrapped around. Oh, sorry, shaking your camera there. All right, let's go sew it together. Okay, I've sewn the top and the bottom together, and these are the gathering threads that I had wrapped around those pins. I pulled the pins out and I spread them out so I wouldn't stitch over them as I went. Now, before I pull out the gathering stitches, I do like to pop it right sides out and make sure that everything went fine, that there's no puckers or, you know, gaps where I missed something, or if there's like a bunch of gathering all in one place. And I have done that and it all looks fine. So now I'm going to show you how I like to try and remove my gathering stitches to begin with. Now, it doesn't always work perfectly because maybe you stitched over the thread while you were sewing it together, or, you know, for whatever reason it can get tangled or snap or whatever. But what I like to try and do first, if I've done everything else correctly and they're not connected at the side seams and I haven't stitched over them and I haven't tied the top bits in knots, hopefully I should be able to just pull this gathering thread as if I were gathering it. And eventually it will just come out. Or maybe it will snap, but even if it snaps, it will have come out somewhat. Let me try this other one. So I'll pull on this other gathering thread. So it's just like I'm gathering it up, but if you're lucky, it actually comes all the way out in one piece, which that one just did. So I'll go back and try this one. I must have sewn over it at some point. I'll pull the rest of this one out. And now that one has come out as well. So both of the white threads have come out. Now on the other side I used pink, but because those white threads came out all in one piece, I should now just be able to reach in there and pull that pink one out. And there it goes. And that's come out as well. Now, possibly the other pink thread is still attached to the outside of the dress, but because I tie them together, sometimes it all just comes out in one piece, which I think it has done. Let's have another look at that. So there's my 2 rows of gathering stitches. There's the white threads. The pink thread was the other color that I used when I was gathering. And because I've tried to stitch in between my 2 rows of gathering, I've got one pink thread in the seam allowance and the other pink thread is on the right side of the skirt below the seam line. And I had tied those pink threads together so that they wouldn't pull through before I started gathering. But let's just see what happens if I try and pull out the white threads from the top. Oh yeah, that one's just come out so easy. That whole white thread has just come straight out. Try the second one. Yep, that's come out as well. And then the pink thread in the seam allowance should come out because there's nothing holding it in there. And the only thing is that I had tied them together. So there you can see actually there's the notch. So now the front one is also pulling through there. But if I pull on it hard enough to snap it, I should be able to pull the entire thing out from the other end. There it is. That's the whole pink thread. So now there's no gathering threads caught up anywhere. They all came out in one piece, and now I don't have to go back and try and pull little tiny bits of thread out of my waistband seam. Okay, so now I'm going to put it right sides out, just double check one last time that everything is fine, and then I will overlock this waist seam. And then the only thing left to do is hem. Okay, it is finished. I have hemmed it and it's all done. I have it inside out at the moment because I want to show you what the inside looks like. But then I will pop it on and do a twirl and show you what it looks like all finished. So you can see the lovely face neckline, looks beautiful, nice and neat. I will say about the overlocking, it definitely works to use bobbins as your overlocking thread. If you have a lot of thread, but you don't have overlocking cones, it is an option. It does work, like the tension's fine. But what I will say is that like the bobbins run out so quick, and I spent a lot of time just rewinding bobbins and rethreading the machine because bobbins don't hold that much thread. So I don't think I would have been able to get overlocking cones in this color anyway. I did have a look at Spotlight when I went to buy thread and they had nothing even close. So I do think it was the right choice because it looks beautiful on the inside. Like you can't even see really those seams at all because the overlocking thread is such a good match. So I think it looks very neat and tidy, and so I am happy that I did that. But next time I would just buy full reels, which I ended up having to go buy reels anyway, so it didn't save me any time or money or thread to do that. Yeah, it just ended up costing me time to rewind. But the color choice I stand by. Okay, so I also just want to show you the pockets. So, sorry, I'm being a bit awkward at the moment. So there is the dress, here's the sleeve, here is the waistband, and there's the pocket. So the pocket bag comes all the way down here. That's the normal size of the pocket bag, but then it's extended up and it's sewn into this waist seam and then into the side seam. So that just means that the pocket's always going to stay right at the front, hanging straight down. It's not going to be able to flop around and like go to the back or anything like that. It gives it I think a smoother finish, and it's just nicer. It keeps everything neat and tidy and beautiful. And for the hem, I just turned it up by about 1/2 inch and then turned it up by about 1 inch. Very simple. It's just a straight hem. Yeah, I think it turned out great. So I'm gonna go pop it on and do a little spin around so you can see what it looks like. And then it'll be ready to pack up and send to my lovely friend. So that's exciting. All right, back in a second. Here it is. This fabric is so light and crisp, but not structured. Like it doesn't stick out and hold its shape, but somehow it is still just crisp and delicious. It's really lovely fabric. Again, it's by Merchant and Mills. I purchased it at the Dahlia Society, and the color doesn't come up super well on screen, but it is like a rich, warm, reddish, chocolatey brown. It's really lovely. It does come in other colors too, I think. Yeah, so the pockets are fantastic. Again, I do raise the pockets by a couple of inches, and my hands like touch the bottoms of my fingertips, touch the bottoms of the pocket bags. If they were any lower, they'd be like down here. So I think that that is the right choice. Hopefully AB's arms are the same length as mine. Yeah, so that's it. It's all done. And I think it looks lovely. I hope she'll be very happy. It did take longer than it should have, but that was no fault of the dress or the pattern or anything. That was just life being life. Okay, so the next thing on my cutting table, the next garment anyway, is going to be a birthday dress for my daughter. It's her birthday next week. She will be, how old will she be? 27, which is impossible because I'm still 27. I'm going to be a grandmother this year. Like, anyhow, it's her birthday next week, and I said I would make her a dress, and she said yes, please. And so she has chosen, let me show you, found it, the Vali dress. This is mine. This is the first one I made. I've made this 3 times. And it's by Pattern Fantastique. Something changed about their patterns recently. Maybe you can no longer buy them in PDF, but you have to buy them in paper copies from retailers. I'm not sure. If it's available, I'll link it. And the fabric she has chosen is this one, which is actually a quilting wide back fabric. Moda wide backs, the company Moda, their wide back fabrics are sort of like a, try and get one layer. They're like a cotton sateen. They're a little bit shimmery, well, not shimmery. They're a cotton sateen, so it's lighter than normal quilting cotton, and it's tightly woven, but not as structured as like a poplin or anything. It's got beautiful drape. I've made a number of dresses out of wide back fabrics, and this is the fabric that she's chose. It's brand new in the shop. It's by Create Joy Project, and it comes in this white background, and bear with, and also this blue background. And I am definitely making myself a dress out of this blue one. It is so beautiful. So then me and my daughter can be kind of twins. Right, this fabric is 108 inches wide, which is almost 2 3/4 meters, 274 centimeters wide. So in length, you don't need anywhere near as much to make a dress out of. So yeah, that is the plan. Also, speaking of fabric, I wanted to mention this fabric is only, I think it's about 110 centimeters wide, so about 42 inches, you know, and then minus the selvages, so a bit less than that. The Hope dress pattern says it takes 2.8 meters for this size, a size 18, 2.8 meters of 148 centimeter fabric. So what is that? 45 inches, like the wide dressmaking fabric. It takes 2.8 meters. Because my fabric is so narrow, I purchased 4 meters of it, and I don't think I could have gotten away with much less than that. So by the time you do both skirt pieces on the fold, the fabric's not wide enough for them to go side by side, or even to like Tetris settle. You've got to do them completely on their own. And then the sleeves are also very big because they're like raglan, so the sleeves are like super huge, so you need 2 of those. And then your facings and things like that. So yeah, I have like a long-ish strip that's about 20 centimeters, 8 inches wide from cutting out the skirt pieces, and then like a couple of squares left over from in between the sleeves. But I wouldn't have gotten away with much less than that, I don't think. So yeah, if your fabric is narrow, I would recommend 4 meters. But when your fabric is this beautiful, totally worth it. Okay, that is all I have for you today. I hope that you are happy and well, and that you enjoyed this little sew along adventure. I'll see you next time with something else. Okay, I love you. Bye.